Letter 1.
To Mrs. Margaret Saville, England. St. Petersburg, 11th December. My dear sister, I arrived here yesterday in good health and full of hope. The cold wind from the north fills me with excitement. I dream of the North Pole, the goal of my voyage. In my dream, it is a beautiful place where the sun never sets, and I will be the first man to walk upon its virgin snow. I am not afraid of danger or death. Who knows? I might find a passage to the east that will help our traders. Or perhaps I will discover something useful to science. So do not worry about me, Margaret. You know that I always wanted to be an explorer, except for the few years when I tried to be a poet and failed. Ever since I inherited my fortune 6 years ago, I have dreamt of this voyage. In 2 weeks I will go to Archangel to hire a ship and a crew. In June we will sail north. When will I return to you? I do not know. If I succeed, years will pass before we meet again. If I fail, you will see me soon or never. Goodbye, my dear Margaret. Your affectionate brother, R. Walton.
Letter 2.
To Mrs. Saville, England. Archangel, 28th March. I have hired a ship and crew. The men are brave and diligent, but I have no friend. I have no one to talk to about my hopes and fears. I will not find a friend here at Archangel or on the sea. As I wait for the voyage to begin, I am full of excitement. Sometimes I am happy. At other times I am afraid. Will I see you again, dear Margaret? Write to me often. Your letters comfort me. If you never hear from me again, remember me with affection. Your brother, Robert Walton.
Letter 3.
To Mrs. Saville, England. 7th July. My dear sister, the voyage has begun at last. I am well and in good spirits. Although great sheets of ice float past us on the sea, it is summer, and warm winds blow us north. Now I feel sure that I will succeed. Goodbye, Margaret. Robert.
Frankenstein's narrative. Chapter 2. I was a diligent student. I became very interested in the human body. Where does life come from? I asked myself. To study life, you must also study death. I began to work with dead bodies. I studied the progress of their decay. I examined the change from life to death and from death to life. Then one day I suddenly understood. I was surprised that nobody had discovered the secret before. I had succeeded where other men had failed. I am not mad. I swear it is true. After days and nights of work, I discovered how life was created. I, myself, was able to create life. I can see by your eager expression, my friend, that you want me to tell you the secret. I will not tell you, and soon you will understand why not. Listen to my story and learn from my example. Knowledge is dangerous. An ambitious man is not a happy man. My first task was to create a body. I worked day and night. I grew thin and pale, but I continued to work. The moon watched me through the window as I uncovered the secrets of nature. What horrible work it was. I explored dead bodies and tortured living animals. But my work did not seem horrible to me then. I thought that I had conquered death. I would be the creator of a new race of happy and excellent creatures. All summer I worked on my filthy creation in a lone attic room. I did not see the sunshine, the flowers, or the green leaves. I did not write to my family or think about them. I thought only of my work. Any ambition that makes you forget the people you love and the simple pleasures of ordinary life is bad. The leaves fell from the trees, and still I worked. I became anxious and nervous. I avoided other people. I hid myself like a criminal. My creation was nearly done. Soon it would be finished, and then I promised myself I would rest and recover my health. Chapter 3. I completed my creation one cold, rainy night in November. With trembling hands, I gathered my instruments to give life to the dead thing that lay at my feet. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when, by the light of the candle, I saw the yellow eye of the creature open. He breathed. He moved. How can I describe him? I had tried to make him beautiful. Great God! His skin was yellow and wrinkled. His hair was long and black. His eyes were watery. He was monstrous. I had worked for nearly 2 years for this moment. Now that the moment had come, I felt nothing but horror and disgust. I ran out of the room. For hours I lay awake in my bedroom, horrified by what I had done. When at last I fell asleep, I dreamt that I saw Elizabeth, young and healthy, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her. But when I kissed her, she grew pale and cold. Her face began to change into the face of my dead mother. She was wrapped in a shroud, and I saw the grave worms crawling in its folds. I woke up trembling with horror. My forehead was cold with sweat. By the pale yellow light of the moon, I saw the monster I had created. He was standing beside my bed, looking down at me. He made a sound, grinned at me, and stretched out his hand to touch me. I ran away and spent the rest of the night outside. The next morning was grey and rainy. I walked the streets of Ingolstadt, afraid to return to my apartment. Suddenly, I heard someone call my name.
Victor!
Turning round, I saw Henry Clerval stepping out of the coach that had just arrived from Geneva.
My dear Frankenstein!
He cried.
I'm so glad to see you. I have come to study at the university.
We walked to my apartment together. I asked him about my father, Elizabeth, and William.
They are all well, but they are a little worried because you do not write to them,
he said. Then he stopped and looked at me anxiously.
But, my dear Frankenstein, you are ill. You are so pale and thin.
I told him that I'd been working too much. I didn't want to think about what had happened the night before. I was afraid to see the monster again, but I was even more afraid that Henry would see him. When we came to my apartment, I left Henry at the door. I ran upstairs and into my room, trembling with fear. The apartment was empty. Relieved, I called Henry and told him to come upstairs.
Victor, what is the matter?
Asked Henry. I covered my face with my hands and said, "Do not ask me." Then I fainted. Poor Clerval. I was very ill for several months. Henry nursed me. He did not tell my family how ill I was. He did not wish to worry them. Slowly, I recovered. By the time I was well enough to look out of my window again, it was springtime. One morning, Henry brought me a letter. It was from Elizabeth. Chapter 5. The letter was from my father.
My dear Victor, how can I tell you what has happened? We were all so happy, waiting for you to come home. I want to prepare you for the awful news, but it isn't possible. William is dead. Your sweet little brother has been murdered. Last Thursday, Elizabeth, William, and I went for a walk in Plain Palais. William ran off to play. When it came time to go home, we called his name, but he did not answer. We searched until it was dark, but we could not find him. Then Elizabeth said he might have gone home. We returned to the house, but he was not there. We went back to Plain Palais with torches and servants to help in the search. About 5 o'clock in the morning, I found him dead. The marks of the murderer's fingers were on his neck. When Elizabeth saw the body, she cried,
"Oh, God! I have murdered my lovely boy!"
She told me that she had given William a locket on a chain with a picture of your mother inside it. The locket is gone. Perhaps the murderer killed William for the locket. Come home, dear Victor. We need you. Do not think of revenge. Just come home to those who love you. Your father, Alphonse Frankenstein. Geneva, 12th May.
Horrified by this news, I said goodbye to Clerval and left for Geneva immediately. At first I wished to get home as soon as possible, to comfort my poor family. But when I got close to Geneva, I began to feel afraid. I stopped 2 days at Lausanne, in a state of nervous anxiety. Then the lake and the mountains calmed me, and I continued my journey. The sight of Mont Blanc brought tears to my eyes. As I approached my hometown, I became afraid again. It was dark when I arrived, and the city gates were already closed for the night. I decided to visit the place where William had died and spend the night in a nearby village. When I got to Plain Palais, there was a thunderstorm. I watched the lightning over Mont Blanc. Suddenly, in a flash of lightning, I saw a gigantic figure nearby. It was the monster. Was he the murderer of my little brother? I began to tremble. In another flash of lightning, I saw him climbing Mont Salève with amazing speed. He soon reached the top and disappeared. 2 years had passed since I created the monster. Was this his first crime? I spent the rest of the night in the mountains, trembling and crying. I felt as if the monster were a horrible part of myself, forced to destroy everyone I loved. The sun rose, and I hurried to my father's house. I wanted to tell what I knew of the murderer. But then I thought, if I tell the truth, everyone will think I'm mad. I decided to remain silent. My father and Elizabeth met me at the door. They were both thin and pale with sorrow.
"Welcome, my dearest Victor,"
said my father.
"What a pity you did not come months ago, when we were happy. Poor William. He was such a lovely little boy."
We three all wept in each other's arms. Then my father said,
It makes me even sadder to think that Justine could have done such a thing."
"Justine?" I asked, amazed.
"Did you not know?"
asked Elizabeth.
"Justine has been arrested for the murder of William."
"But she is innocent," I said.
"I wish I could believe that,"
said my father. He explained that on the morning after the murder, Justine had fallen ill and spent several days in bed. One of the servants, taking Justine's clothes to be washed, found something in her pocket. It was the locket, with the picture of my mother inside, that had been on a chain around William's neck. "Justine is innocent," I said again.
"Oh, thank you, Victor,"
cried Elizabeth.
"I feel sure that she is innocent. Perhaps you can prove it. You are so kind and generous. No one else believes in Poor Justine.
Chapter 6. At 11 o'clock, Justine's trial began. In the court I suffered torture. Was I to be the cause of her death too? I wanted to tell everyone that I was the guilty one, but I hadn't been in Geneva at the time. Everyone would think I was mad, and Justine would be punished anyway. She told her story to the court.
I went to search for William,
she said.
I searched for hours. It was late at night and I was tired. I lay down in a barn to rest for a few minutes, but then I fell asleep. In the morning, I woke up feeling ill, so I went home and went to bed. I do not know how the locket with the picture of Mrs. Frankenstein inside came to be in my pocket.
They did not believe her. Justine was found guilty of the murder. I felt sick with horror and despair. The next day she was hanged. Elizabeth wept, but her sadness was the sadness of innocence. I, the true murderer, had no hope or comfort. Chapter 7. I felt as if my soul were in hell. I wanted to kill the monster I had created. When I thought of him, my mind was full of hatred and revenge. I wished to see him again so that I could avenge the deaths of William and Justine. My father became ill with sadness and grief. Elizabeth grew pale and thin. I felt horribly guilty. My only comfort was to escape to the mountains and forget my sorrows for a few days. The mountains and rivers were made by God. In the magnificent alpine valleys, I felt his power and was afraid of nothing else. On one of these journeys in August, nearly 2 years after the death of Justine, I entered the valley of Chamonix. Rivers of ice came down from the mountains. The great white dome of Mont Blanc stood above me. I decided to climb Montanvert. I remembered the view from the top of the mountain. That sublime landscape alone could tranquilize my soul. Chapter 8. Montanvert is very steep. The path winds slowly up the mountain. The pine trees on both sides were heavy with snow. It was midday when I arrived at the top of the mountain. Then I climbed down onto the glacier. I spent 2 hours crossing that great river of ice. Then I sat on a rock to rest, looking back at Montanvert and, behind it, Mont Blanc. The snowy peaks of the mountains glistened above the clouds in the sunshine. For a moment, I was happy. Suddenly, I saw a man running towards me over the ice. As he approached me at great speed, I recognized him. It was the monster I had created. I trembled with hatred and anger. "Devil!" I cried. "Are you not afraid to approach me? Are you not afraid that I will avenge the deaths of those you have murdered?"
I expected this,
said the monster.
Everyone hates me. I am the most miserable creature on earth. Even you, my creator, hate me. You say you will kill me. How dare you play with life and death? Do your duty towards me, and I will do my duty towards you and the rest of mankind. Do what I ask, and I will leave you and them in peace. If you refuse, I will murder everyone you love.
Hateful monster! Devil! I was mad to create you. Now I will destroy you.
Be calm,
he said,
and hear my story. Remember that you made me stronger than you. Oh, Frankenstein, you are fair to everyone else. Be fair to me, your creature, as well.
I should be your Adam, but instead I am your Satan. Everywhere I see happiness. But for me, there is no happiness. I was good, but unhappiness made me evil. Make me happy, and I will be good again.
Go, I cried. I will not listen to you. We are enemies. Either go, or fight with me until one of us is dead.
How can I make you understand?
Replied the monster.
I was capable of love and kindness. But I am alone. Everyone hates me. I hide in the mountains. I live in the caves of ice. If people knew of my existence, they would try to kill me. How can I love them when they hate me? If I am unhappy, I will make them unhappy too. But you can save them. If you refuse my request, I will kill not only you and your family, but many others too. Listen to my tale. In court, the guilty are allowed to speak in their own defense before they are condemned. You say I am a murderer, but you want to murder me, your own creature. Listen to me, and then, if you wish, destroy the work of your own hands.
Do not remind me that I am your creator. I wish you had never come to life. I curse my own hands for having made you. Go! I hate the sight of you!
Then do not look at me,
said the monster, and he put his horrible hands over my eyes.
Do not look at me, but listen. Hear my tale. It is long and strange. Before the sun sets this evening, you will know everything. Then you will decide whether I will go away to live a harmless life or stay to murder your fellow creatures.
I agreed to listen to his story. I was curious to know what had happened to him, and for the first time I felt that as his creator I had a duty towards him. He took me across the ice to a small hut. Inside, he lit a fire. I sat down, and the monster began his tale. The Monster's Narrative. Chapter 9.
I do not remember very much about the beginning of my life. I saw, felt, heard, and smelt all at the same time. When I left your apartment, I took your coat because I was cold. I remember the light grew strong, and I had to close my eyes. I looked for shade and found it in the forest of Ingolstadt. There I rested by a river. After a while, I felt hungry and thirsty. I drank from the river and ate some berries. Then I fell asleep. When I awoke, it was dark and cold. I was frightened. I sat down and wept. Soon, a gentle light came, and I saw a shining white foam rise above the trees. I felt only hunger and thirst and light and darkness. When I looked at the moon, I felt pleasure. Days and nights passed. Slowly, I began to distinguish the things around me. I discovered that the pleasant sounds I often heard came from the birds that flew across the light. That pleased me. Sometimes I tried to imitate their sounds, but I could not. The moon disappeared from the night. Then it came again, but smaller this time. I was still in the forest. One cold day, I found a fire that some travelers had left burning. The warmth of the fire gave me pleasure. I put my hand into the fire and felt pain. Crying and nursing my hand, I looked at the fire. How strange, I thought, that it gives both pleasure and pain. I saw that it was made of wood. I gathered wood to keep the fire burning, then lay down beside it to sleep. Often, I spent the whole day looking for food. Sometimes I went to sleep hungry. I decided to leave the forest and find another place where there was more food. I began my journey in the evening and walked for 3 days. Then I came to the open country. Snow had fallen the night before, and the fields were white. I shivered with cold. In the morning, I saw a small hut. I entered. Inside was an old man, preparing some food over a fire. When he saw me, he screamed and ran out of the hut. He ran across the fields and disappeared from sight. I had never seen a hut before, and it seemed a wonderful place. I ate the old man's food, then lay down and fell asleep. I woke at midday and continued my journey. At sunset, I arrived at a village. I admired the huts and cottages. I saw vegetables growing in the gardens. I saw milk and cheese through the windows of the cottages. I was hungry. When I entered a cottage, the children inside screamed, and a woman fainted. The villagers came running. Some attacked me. I escaped to the open country. I hid myself in a small hut beside a cottage. It was bare and uncomfortable, but I was happy to have found a place to hide from the weather and from the violence of human beings. Lying in the hut, looking out through a crack in its wooden wall, I saw a young woman. She carried a bucket filled with milk. She looked sad. Then a young man appeared. He too had a sad expression. He took the bucket from her and carried it into the cottage. She followed, and they disappeared from sight. My hut shared one wall with their cottage. In this wall, there was a window, but it was covered with planks of wood. One of the planks had a small hole in it. I looked through the hole. The inside of their cottage was clean but very bare. An old man sat beside the fire, playing a musical instrument. The sound he made was more beautiful than the sounds of birds. The young woman was sitting close to him. I could see that there were tears in her eyes. The old man did not notice this until she sobbed aloud. Then he called her name. She came to him, and he put his arms around her. I felt both pleasure and pain watching them. I had never felt that way before, and I moved away from the window, unable to bear my emotions. When night came, I was surprised to see that the cottagers could make light with candles. They sat around the fire, and the young man made sounds that I did not understand. I now know he was reading aloud to them. After a while, they put out the candles and went to bed.
Chapter 11.
One day, in the spring, a young lady arrived at the cottage. As soon as he saw her, Felix's expression changed from sadness to great joy. When the young lady spoke to the cottagers, they did not understand her. It seemed she had a language of her own. She was very beautiful, with dark hair and eyes. Felix called her his sweet Arabian. She did not understand, but smiled. The old man embraced the young stranger affectionately. Gentle Agatha kissed her hands. In the evening, I noticed that the cottagers were repeating the same sounds again and again. The young stranger repeated after them. I realized that they were teaching her their language. If I listened, I too could learn. When the stranger went to bed, Felix said,
Good night, sweet Safi.
The days passed peacefully. The only difference was that now my cottagers were happy instead of sad. Safi and I learned the language very quickly. Meanwhile, the woods were full of flowers, and the nights grew warm and pleasant. My days were spent in study. I learned more quickly than Safi. We learned to read as well as to speak. The book Felix used to teach Safi was Volney's Ruins of Empires. Felix explained everything as he read aloud. Through this book, I learned a little about the histories, governments, customs, and religions of many different countries. I heard of the Greeks and early Romans. I heard of the decline of the Roman Empire, chivalry, Christianity, and kings. I heard of the discovery of America and wept with Safi over the sad fate of the American Indians. These stories amazed me. How could human beings be so powerful, noble, and good, but at the same time so violent and evil? I learned of the division of property, the rich and the poor, and of aristocratic families. I learned that to be rich and from an aristocratic family was the best condition. A person could be respected with only one of these advantages, but with neither of them, he was a slave. He had to work for the good of the fortunate few. And what was I? I knew nothing of my Creator. I had no money, no friends, and no property. And I was horribly ugly. I was not even a human being. I saw and heard of no others like me. The smiles of Safi and the gentle words of Agatha were not for me. I was a monster, alone in the world. My sadness grew with my knowledge. I wished that I had stayed in the woods and never known anything more than hunger, thirst, and cold.
Chapter 12.
Slowly, I came to understand the history of my cottagers. The old man's name was de Lacy. He was a Frenchman of good family. They had lived in Paris in a beautiful house. Safi's father was a Turkish merchant who had lived in Paris for many years. On the day Safi arrived from Constantinople to live with him, her father was put in prison by the French government for some crime I did not understand. Many people felt that he had been unjustly condemned. Felix was present in the court when the Turk was condemned to death. Horrified, Felix decided to help him to escape from prison. The Turk offered money, but Felix refused to take it. Then he saw the lovely Safi, and he fell in love with her. In the days before the escape, Safi wrote several letters to Felix, with the help of a servant who understood French. I have copies of these letters, which I will give to you. They will prove that my story is true. In her letters, Safi explained that her mother was a Christian Arab who had been enslaved by the Turks. Safi's father fell in love with her and married her. Her mother, born in freedom, taught Safi to be a Christian and to want more liberty than Muslim women are allowed. Although her mother was dead, Safi remembered these things. She did not want to return to Asia and live in a harem. She wanted to marry a Christian and live in a Christian country. On the day of the escape, old DeLacy and Agatha left their house and hid in an obscure part of Paris. Felix, meanwhile, left Paris with the Turk and Safi, who were travelling on passports in the names of old DeLacy and Agatha. They left France and travelled through Italy. Safi's father wished to return to Turkey. He promised Safi and Felix that they would be married, but secretly he hated the idea of his daughter marrying a Christian. News came from Paris that old DeLacy and Agatha had been arrested and put in prison for helping the Turk to escape. Felix immediately went back to Paris. The Turk agreed to leave Safi in a convent in Leghorn, where Felix could find her when he returned. Felix and his family were put on trial and found guilty. They lost their fortune and were exiled from France. Felix wrote to the Turk to tell of his misfortunes and his new home in Germany, but the Turk had not kept his promise. He had returned to Turkey, ordering Safi to follow with his property when it arrived in Leghorn. Safi tried to argue with him, but he left in anger, ordering her again to follow him in a few days. Once alone, Safi sold her jewels and travelled with a servant to Germany to find Felix and his family.
Chapter 13.
One night in August, when I was walking in the woods, I found a bag full of books. I took it and ran back to my hut. The books were Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives, and The Sorrows of Werther. These treasures gave me great happiness. They showed me new worlds of thought and feeling. Sometimes they filled me with joy, but more often they filled me with sadness. I thought Werther a divine being, and I wept at his death, although I did not really understand it. As I read, I thought of my own feelings and condition. In some ways, I resembled the people in these books, but in other ways, I was different from them. I was alone. My body was gigantic and ugly. What did this mean? Who was I? What was I? Where did I come from? What was the purpose of my life? I asked myself these questions often, but I could not answer them. Plutarch's Lives taught me to love and admire the heroes of the past. I read about men who governed or murdered their fellow human beings. I preferred those who governed peacefully because they resembled my cottagers. When I read Paradise Lost, I thought it was a true story. It often reminded me of my own condition. Like Adam, I was the only example of my kind, but God made Adam beautiful. Adam's creator cared for him and talked to him. I was completely alone. Often I thought I resembled Satan more than Adam. Like Satan, I saw the happiness of other creatures, and I felt envious. The coat I took from your apartment had some papers in the pocket. When I had learned to read, I looked at them. They were your journal for the 4 months before you created me. When I read it, I cursed my creator. Why did you make me so horribly ugly that even you turned from me in disgust? Even Satan had friends, the other devils, to admire him, but I had nobody. My creator had abandoned me. The autumn passed. I saw with surprise and grief the leaves fall from the trees. Nature became once again cold and sad, as it was when I first awoke in the woods. In summer, the flowers and birds had comforted me. Now I longed even more to show myself to the cottagers. To win their affection was my greatest ambition. I decided to enter the cottage when the old man was alone. I knew that my ugliness frightened people, but my voice was not frightening. I thought that I could talk to the old man first and win his sympathy. One day in winter, Safi, Agatha, and Felix went for a walk in the countryside. The old man was left alone in the cottage. Trembling with excitement and fear, I knocked on the door of the cottage.
"Who is there?"
said the old man.
"Come in."
"I am sorry to disturb you," I said. "I am a traveler, and I am tired. Please, would you let me sit by your fire for a few minutes?"
"Come in,"
said the old man.
"My children are not home, and I am blind, so I will not be able to get you food."
"I have food. All I need is a little warmth." I sat down. After a silence, the old man asked,
"Are you French?"
"No," I replied, "but I was educated by a French family. I am going to some friends who I hope will help me."
"Are they German?"
asked the old man. "No, they are French. I have no other friends in the world. These people have never seen me, and I am afraid, because if they will not help me, I have no other hope."
"Do not despair. If your friends are good people, they will help you."
"They are kind," I said. "They are wonderful people, but they are prejudiced against me. I am not bad. I have never hurt anyone, but when they look at me, they will see a horrible monster."
"If you really mean no harm, can you not explain that to them?"
"Yes, I will try. I love these friends very much. For many months I have been doing small things to help them, but they believe I want to hurt them."
"Where do they live?"
asked the old man. "Nearby."
"If you will tell me your story, perhaps I can help you. I cannot see your face, but I like your voice. I want to help you."
"Thank you," I cried. "Those are the first kind words that have ever been spoken to me."
"Will you tell me the names of your friends?"
he asked. At that moment, I heard the sounds of the young people returning to the cottage. "Help me," I cried. "Now is the moment. You and your family are the friends for who I am searching. Do not abandon me." Felix, Safi, and Agatha entered the cottage. How can I describe their horror when they saw me? Agatha fainted. Safi ran out of the cottage. Felix attacked me and hit me with a stick. I could have killed him with my bare hands, but I did not. Filled with pain and sorrow, I ran out of the cottage and escaped unseen to my hut.
Chapter 14.
Cursed Creator! Why did I live? Why did I not die in that horrible moment? I felt angry and wanted revenge. I could have destroyed the cottage and killed the cottagers with pleasure. When night came, I left the hut and ran howling through the woods. The cold stars shone down on me, and the bare trees swayed in the wind. Like Satan, I carried a hell inside me. From that moment I was at war with mankind, and above all with the man who had given me this miserable life. When I returned to the cottage, I found that the cottagers had left. I waited all day. They did not return. That night, in anger, I placed wood around the cottage and set fire to it. The cottage burned quickly to the ground, and I ran into the woods. Where could I go? I thought of you. I knew from your journal that you were my father, my creator, and that Geneva was your hometown. I decided to go there. You were my only hope, but I hated you. It was a long and difficult journey. Because I was afraid of being seen by human beings, I traveled only at night. Rain and snow fell upon me. I had nowhere to hide. As I came closer to your hometown, my anger and my desire for revenge grew stronger. One morning, I continued walking after the sun had risen. The forest was far from any village, so I thought I was safe. It was the beginning of spring. The sun warmed me, and I felt happy for the first time in many months. Walking by the side of a river, I heard human voices.
Lovely day.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, wasn't it?
I hid myself under a tree. A young woman ran towards the place where I was hidden. Suddenly, she slipped and fell into the river. I ran out of my hiding place and jumped into the river to save her. When I carried her onto the riverbank, she fainted. Then a man appeared. He ran towards me and took the young woman from my arms. Then he turned and ran into the forest. I followed him. When the man saw me behind him, he shot me with a gun. I fell to the ground, and he escaped into the woods. I was in awful pain. Was this the reward for my kindness? I had saved a human being from death, and now I suffered for it. I swore revenge on all mankind. For several weeks, I lived a miserable life in the forest, trying to nurse my wound. Finally, it healed, and I continued my journey. It was evening when I reached the countryside around Geneva. I was very tired and lay down to sleep in a field. I was awoken by the approach of a beautiful child. As I looked at him, I thought perhaps he was too young to be frightened of me. If I could take him with me and educate him, I would not be alone any more. I tried to take him in my arms, but when he saw me, he put his hands over his face and screamed.
Ah!
"Why are you screaming, child?" I said. "I will not hurt you,"
Let me go!
cried the child.
Monster! Ugly monster! You want to kill me and eat me! Let me go, or I'll tell my father!
"Come with me," I said,
No!
cried the boy.
Let me go! My father's Mr. Frankenstein the magistrate. He'll punish you.
"Frankenstein!" I cried. "Then you are from the family of my enemy!" The child kept screaming at me. I put my hands around his throat to silence him. The next moment, he lay dead at my feet. I looked at the dead child, and I felt glad. I too can cause pain, I thought. This will make Frankenstein suffer. Then I saw something around his neck. It was a chain and locket. In the locket was a picture of a lovely woman. For a few moments, I looked at it with pleasure. Then my anger returned. No woman would ever love me. If this woman could see me, she would faint or scream. I left the place where I had murdered the child to look for a hiding place. I entered a barn. There I found a young woman asleep. She was not as beautiful as the woman in the picture, but she was young and healthy. She will smile at everyone except for me, I thought. I bent over her and whispered, "Wake up. Your lover is here. I would die for one of your smiles. Wake up." She moved in her sleep. I was afraid she would awaken. If she woke up, she would scream, and I would be arrested for the murder. That thought brought out the devil in me. She, not I, will suffer for the murder, I thought. It is her fault, really. The fault of all the women who will never smile at me. I put the locket in her clothes and ran away. After a few days, I came to these mountains. I am alone and miserable. No human being will love me, but someone like myself would love me. Make me a wife, Frankenstein. Create a female of my own kind. This you must do for me.
Chapter 15. Frankenstein's narrative continues. The monster stopped speaking and waited for an answer. "I refuse to do it," I said. "Go away. I have given you your answer. I will never create another being like you."
You are wrong,
said the monster.
But instead of being angry, I will reason with you. I am bad because I am sad. Everyone hates me. Why should I pity human beings when they do not pity me? If people would be kind to me, I would be kind to them. But that cannot be. If I cannot have love, I will have revenge. All I ask is a female like myself. We will be monsters, alone in the world, but we will have each other. Our lives will not be happy, but they will be harmless. Do not refuse me.
I was moved. As his creator, it was my duty to make him happy if I could. He saw the change in my expression and said,
If you agree, I will go with my wife to the forests of South America. We can live on berries. We can sleep under the trees.
His words made me pity him, but when I looked at his face, I felt nothing but disgust. After thinking for a long time, I said, I will do it. You must promise to leave Europe forever as soon as I give you a female to go with you. And you must promise to stay away from human beings.
I promise!
Cried the monster.
Go home and begin your work. I will watch you, and when you are ready, I will appear.
With these words, he left me. I saw him go down the mountain at great speed. He disappeared over the river of ice as the sun was setting. Chapter 16. I returned to Geneva, but I did not have the courage to begin my horrible work. I was in better health now, and when I could forget my promise to the monster, I was happier too. One day my father said to me,
I'm glad to see that you are better, Victor, but I notice that you are still sad sometimes. Is it because of Elizabeth? I have always hoped you and Elizabeth would marry. You have loved each other since you were children, but maybe I have been blind. Perhaps you love Elizabeth as a sister. Perhaps you love someone else and want that other person to be your wife. Am I right, Victor? Is this the reason for your sadness?
My dear father, I replied, do not worry. I love Elizabeth very much, and I want to marry her.
I am so happy to hear that. Why not marry as soon as possible?
The idea of marrying Elizabeth immediately filled me with horror. I had to create the female and see the two monsters leave Europe before I could marry. An Englishman had made new discoveries in science. I wanted to speak to this man before beginning work on a female for the monster. I thought it would be better to do my awful work in England, far away from my family. Therefore, I told my father that I had to go to England, and that when I returned, I would marry Elizabeth. My father and Elizabeth asked Clerval to travel with me. At first, I thought that this would make it more difficult to do my work, but then I was glad. I thought the monster would not come near me while Henry was there. I did not like to leave my family alone, ignorant of their enemy. but I thought that the monster would follow me to England, so my family would be safe. Clerval and I left Geneva in September. On the journey, Clerval noticed all the beauties of nature, but I was gloomy. Slowly, his love of nature tranquilized my soul, and I began to enjoy the passing landscape with him. Clerval, my dear friend. Where is he now? Does he now only exist in my memory? No. His body is gone, but his spirit still visits me. Forgive me for showing my sorrow. It is so painful to remember him. I will continue my story. Chapter 18. One evening I sat in my laboratory. The sun had set and the moon was rising over the sea. I began to think about what I was doing. 3 years ago, I thought, I was doing the same thing. I created a devil whose violence has ruined my life. I am now creating another. She might be even more evil than her mate. He has promised to leave Europe and hide himself in the forests of South America, but she has not promised. She might refuse. They might even hate each other. The monster hates the sight of his own face. Might he not hate the sight of his monstrous mate? She might turn from him in disgust. She might leave him. If they do leave Europe together, I thought, they will have children. They will create a race of devils that might destroy mankind. Have I the right, for my own comfort, to do something that would be a curse on future generations? Before, I had been moved by the monster's arguments and frightened by his threats. Now, for the first time, I realized how wicked my promise was. I thought with horror that perhaps future generations would curse me as the man whose selfishness had caused great suffering to the whole of mankind. I trembled. Then, looking up, I saw the monster at the window by the light of the moon. He was watching me. His face was horribly ugly. It was an evil face. Trembling with anger, I tore to pieces the half-finished creature. The monster saw me destroy his mate. With a howl of pain, he ran away. I left the room, promising myself that I would never return to that work. I went to my bedroom and spent hours by my window, looking out at the moon. There were a few fishing boats on the water. From time to time, the silence was broken by the voices of the fishermen calling to one another. Then, suddenly, I heard the sound of oars in the water. A boat was approaching the shore. A few minutes later, I heard my front door open. I trembled with fear and wanted to cry out for help, but I could not. Like someone who was dreaming a frightening dream, I could neither speak nor move. My bedroom door opened, and I saw the monster. He spoke to me in a trembling voice.
You have destroyed the work you began. What does this mean? Will you break your promise? I have followed you over Europe to this cold, gloomy place. I have been tired and hungry. And now you destroy my hopes.
Go away! I cried. Yes, I break my promise. I will never create another as evil and monstrous as you are.
Slave! I reasoned with you before, but you are unreasonable. Remember that I have the power to make you miserable. You are my creator, but I am your master. Obey!
Your threats cannot force me to do something evil, I said. Go away! Your words only make me angrier. The monster said,
Every man has a wife. Every animal has a mate. Will I be the only creature to live alone? I was capable of love, but everyone hated me. I will not let you be happy while I am miserable. I want revenge more than warmth or food. Before I die, you will be sorry that you were ever born. Remember this. I will be with you on your wedding night.
He ran away. A few moments later, I saw him in his boat, which shot across the water with the speed of an arrow. So, I thought, he will murder me on my wedding night. I thought of poor Elizabeth. How she would suffer if she lost me. As the sun rose, I went out and walked on the beach. I would have been happy to live forever on that miserable island, if only I could live in peace. When I left the island, it would be to meet my own death, or the deaths of those I loved, at the hands of a monster I myself had created. At midday I fell asleep on the grass. When I awoke, the sun was setting. What had happened the night before seemed like a bad dream. A fishing boat landed on the beach, and a man from the boat brought me 2 letters. One was from my father, and the other from Clerval. Clerval wrote that he would soon return to London to complete the arrangements for his journey to India. He asked me to meet him at Perth as soon as possible. I decided to leave the island in 2 days. First, I had to pack my chemical instruments. The next morning, I entered my laboratory. The remains of the half-finished creature lay on the floor. I felt almost as if I had murdered a human being. With trembling hands, I collected my instruments. Then I gathered the remains of the creature and put them in a basket with some heavy stones. When the moon rose that night, I went out in a small boat. I felt like a criminal. I waited until a black cloud covered the moon for a few minutes. Then I dropped the basket into the sea. Relieved, I lay down in the boat and fell into a deep sleep. When I awoke, it was morning. There was a strong wind, and my little boat was in danger. The wind had blown the boat far away from the island, and I did not know where I was. All day the little boat tossed on the sea. I was horribly thirsty and frightened. I thought I was going to die. Then I imagined Elizabeth, my father, and Clerval, all left behind for the monster to murder. At sunset, I saw land in the distance. Tears of joy filled my eyes. As I approached the shore, I saw boats, a harbour, and a small town. I brought my boat into the harbour and stepped onto the shore. People gathered to watch, but they did not offer to help me. "My friends," I said, "could you please tell me the name of this town?" Nobody replied. The people looked angry and unfriendly. "What is the matter?" I asked. "The English are not usually so unfriendly to strangers."
I do not know about the English,
said one man.
but the Irish hate murderers.
What could this mean? Another man stepped forward and put his hand on my shoulder.
"Come, sir,"
he said.
"you must talk to Mr. Kerwin."
"Who is Mr. Kerwin? Why must I talk to him?"
"He is the magistrate, sir.
said the man.
He will want to ask you some questions about a gentleman who was found murdered here last night."
I was surprised, but not greatly worried. I was innocent, and could prove it. I followed the man to Mr. Kerwin's house. I had no idea then of the horror that was waiting for me. Chapter 21. It was evening when we arrived at the hotel. A strong wind blew from the west. Clouds raced across the moon. It began to rain. I had been calm during the day, but now I was afraid. I kept my hand on the gun in my pocket. Every sound frightened me.
"What is the matter, Victor?"
asked Elizabeth. "Do not ask, my love," I replied. "After tonight we will be safe. But tonight is terrible." Suddenly I thought of how frightened she would be if she saw the fight between the monster and myself. I asked her to go to bed. I would not go to her until I had discovered where my enemy was hiding. She left me, and I walked through the house searching everywhere. I did not find him. Suddenly I heard a dreadful scream. It came from Elizabeth's room. As I heard it, I realized the truth. She screamed again, and I ran into the room. Great God, why did I not die? Why am I here to tell you this terrible tale? There she was, dead, lying across the bed, her head hanging down, and her face covered by her hair. I fainted. When I recovered, I was surrounded by the people of the hotel. They had moved Elizabeth to another room. I escaped from them to that room, ran to the bed where Elizabeth lay, and embraced her. The marks of the devil's fingers were on her neck. Looking up, I saw the monster standing outside the open window in the yellow moonlight. He grinned at me and pointed at the body of my wife. I ran to the window, taking the gun from my pocket, but he ran away at great speed and jumped into the lake. The sound of the gun brought people running into the room. We searched for him for hours, but we did not find him. I returned to the hotel feeling sick with horror. Suddenly I thought of my father. The monster might be going to him now. He might murder my father. I decided to return to Geneva as soon as possible. On the journey back, I wept. A devil had robbed me of every hope of future happiness. No creature has ever been as miserable as I was. When I arrived at Geneva, I found my father alive, but he became ill when I told him the terrible news. He could not live with the horrors that surrounded him. In a few days, he died in my arms. What happened to me? I do not know. Sometimes I dreamt I was walking in flowery fields with the people I loved, but I awoke to find myself in prison. Slowly I recovered, and they released me. They had called me mad, and I had spent many months in a cell alone. I thought I had no use for liberty. But slowly, as I recovered, I began to want revenge. I was filled with a maddening anger when I thought of the monster. I began to think of how I could get him. I went to a magistrate and told him that I knew who had destroyed my family. I told my story calmly, giving the dates and the places. I did not want him to think I was mad. He listened to me. Then he said,
"If the monster is as you have described him, I will not be able to catch him. He can live in caves of ice. He can run faster than any man. I will try my best to arrest him, but I am afraid I will fail."
"You do not care about my revenge," I said. "If you cannot help me, I must pursue him alone." He must have thought I was mad. He tried to calm me as a nurse tries to calm a child. I left the house in anger. Chapter 22. Revenge alone gave me strength. I decided to leave Geneva. I took my money and began the travels that will end only with my death. I have travelled all over the world. I have suffered all the difficulties that travellers in deserts and savage countries suffer. Often I have prayed for death, but revenge has kept me alive. I could not die and leave the monster living. Before I left my hometown forever, I visited the cemetery where William, Elizabeth, and my father are buried. The night was nearly dark. The spirits of my loved ones seemed to be around me. They were dead, and I lived. Their murderer, too, was alive, and I must keep living to destroy him. "I swear," said I, that I will find him and kill him, if he does not kill me first. Help me, good spirits, to find him. Help me to avenge you. Let him feel the despair that I feel now. In the silence of the night, I heard a loud and terrifying laugh. I felt as if hell were all around me. The laughter stopped, and a voice said,
I am content. You have decided to live, and I am content.
I ran towards the sound, but I did not catch him. The moon came out from behind the clouds, and I saw him running away at amazing speed. I pursued him. For many months I've been following him. I pursued him over the Mediterranean and over the Black Sea. I followed him over Russia. Sometimes people who had seen him told me where he had gone. Sometimes he himself left some sign for me. He wants me to follow him. He is afraid I might despair and die. I travelled through snow. I saw the print of his great foot on the white ground. How can you, who are young and innocent, understand what I felt? I was cold, tired, and hungry, but that was nothing. I carried a hell inside me. Sometimes when I was dying of hunger, I found food. I think it was left there by the good spirits who travelled with me. Often when I was thirsty, a few drops of rain would fall and relieve me. I tried to follow the rivers, but the monster avoided them because there are more people by the riverbanks. In other places I saw no human beings. I ate the wild animals that I killed. I had money, and I gave it to the villagers to win their help and friendship. I was only happy when I slept. My good spirits gave me sweet dreams. In sleep I saw William, Clerval, Elizabeth, and my father again. Often during the day I told myself that I was dreaming and would wake up that night with the people I loved. At such moments my revenge was more a duty than a desire. I do not know what the monster felt. Sometimes he left messages written on the trees.
Follow me to the frozen north,
he wrote,
where you will suffer, but I will not. I have left a dead rabbit for you. Eat. We will fight to the death, but you will suffer tortures before that moment arrives.
I hate him. I will get my revenge. I will search for him until I die. Then how happy I will be to go to Elizabeth and the others. They are waiting for me. As I travelled north, the weather became colder, the rivers were covered with ice, and I could get no fish. The monster was happy when I suffered. In one message he wrote,
This is just the beginning. You will suffer much more than this.
I bought a sledge and some dogs to pull it. In the sledge I could move very quickly. I did not know if the monster had the same advantages, but every day I got closer to him. I reached a village on the seashore. There the people told me of a gigantic being who had taken food and a sledge with dogs. He had a gun, they said. He had set off in the sledge over the sea of ice. They believed that the ice would break, and he would be killed. I followed him. I do not know how many days have passed since then. One day, one of my dogs died of cold and fatigue. I nearly despaired, but then I saw a dark speck in the distance. It was him. It was then that the ice broke. The sea rolled between me and my enemy. I was left, as you found me, on a floating sheet of ice. If I die before he does, swear to me, Walton, that he will not escape. Kill him for me. I do not ask you to follow him, but if he appears when I am dead, swear you will kill him. He speaks well, and his words might persuade you as they once persuaded me. Do not trust him. Remember the spirits of William, Justine, Clerval, Elizabeth, my father, and your unhappy Victor. kill him. My spirit will be near to help you.